what we're going to do this morning is I'm going to take a little bit of time to go over the book with you. And I'll give you some points that I think that you should be reflecting on as you read the book. Because what I would recommend now is you go back and read the book again. And do it leisurely in light of everything that you've heard this week. And try to see how you apply what's going on in the book to what we have learned this week. Both about culture and about happiness and about identity and about the struggle and all of the things that I'm going to talk to you about after we talk about the book, because what I'm going to try to do, and the team has assigned me this job to try to summarize things and get the nuggets out, as Dee says. Dee, in her papers that she's been reading, she says, these are my nuggets for the day. And I think we all have to go for the nuggets and see what we can take with us. Well, let's just look at this book a little bit. As you know, he takes the title from Shakespeare. And not only that, but he incorporates Shakespeare throughout. And we're going to get to the point as to why that happens. Interestingly enough, Huxley himself doesn't make explicit why we arrived at the brave new world or the world state that he describes in here. He doesn't say why. But if you look at it closer, you can understand precisely why. And that is, how do you get to a point where everything is utilitarian, everything is pragmatic, everything has to be productive, everything is assembly line, and people really have no identity? Well, he says it in the beginning of the book, and I think it's on page 84. Or no, it's in the foreword. It's not 84. It's page 9 of this. He says the theme of Brave New World is not the advancement of science as such. It is the advancement of science as it affects human individuals. Notice he does not use the word person. He uses individuals. It is only by means of the sciences of life that the quality of life can be radically changed. The sciences of matter can be applied in such a way that they will destroy life and make the living of it impossibly complex and uncomfortable. But unless used as instruments by the biologists and the psychologists, they can do nothing to modify the natural forms and expressions of life itself. The release of atomic energy marks a great revolution in human history. And then on page 9, that was on page 11, I'm sorry. It's Roman numerals, I was getting them. I'm dyslexic, I got the one before, or the after and for, okay. It's in his foreword. Do you have a foreword there? Well, he wrote a foreword in 1945 when he's looking back on the book that he wrote in 1932. And all of this is starting to come up now. He's starting to see all this, especially after the Nazi regime and the Third Reich and the way they manipulated life and the way they were trying to clone people. And you remember who was the doctor? Dr. Mengele's people, that, cloning down in Brazil, the boys of Brazil, and all those kinds of things. He says, if I were to rewrite the book, I would offer the savage a third alternative, because there are only two alternatives at the end of the book. Either he goes mad and commits suicide, or he capitulates and goes into civilized society. Between the utopian and the primitive horns of his dilemma would lie the possibility of sanity, a possibility already actualized to some extent in a community of exiles. Is the important point for us. A community of exiles and refugees from the brave new world. So when we're looking around this world and we see immigrants and refugees and exiles all over the place, don't you feel like an exile as a Catholic? Don't you feel like you're a refugee at times, trying to escape this brave new world? Living, and then he goes on, to some extent in a community of exiles and refugees from the brave new world, living within the borders of the reservation. Key word, within the borders of the reservation. He says, science and technology would be used as though, like the Sabbath, they had been made for man, and not as though man were to be adapted and enslaved by them. Religion would be the conscious and intelligent pursuit of man's final end. Oh boy, he's talking about the telos there. The unitive knowledge of the immanent Tao or the immanent Logos. I told you at the beginning, part of the Catholic mystery is the God above and the God within. And he said we would become so aware of God within that we would be able to live religion in a fully active, conscious, participative way. Okay, we're not going to get into his own life and what happened after 1932 to him. He becomes a transcendentalist. He's with Madame Blavatsky in Paris, and he belongs to all those rather the inheritors of her theosophy, and going over into that kind of a world where he's going to get on drugs, LSD, and he's going to experiment with all that kind of thing. So he knows something about Soma. All right. So religion would be the conscious and intelligent pursuit of man's final end, the unitive knowledge. The unitive knowledge, listen, unitive, communio, unitive knowledge of the immanent Tao, and he expands himself here to bridge both Eastern Orient, the Orient, and the Occident. He's saying there has to be something within us. The transcendent Godhead or Brahman. So he's not specifically saying Christian, but at least he's on the right track. He understands what that's all about. And the prevailing philosophy of life would be a kind of higher utilitarianism. And he's using utilitarianism in we got to look for our telos. We got to be practical about this. This is what we have to use. I mean, we have to enter into religion to be able to get there, in which the greatest happiness principle, and here we are, would be secondary to the final end principle. That is perfectly in tune with Catholic belief and Catholic theology. The first question to be asked and answered in every contingency of life being, how will this thought or action contribute to or interfere with the achievement by me and the greatest possible number of other individuals of man's final end? May they all be one, Father, as you are in me and I am in you. Not only for me, but of everybody, the greatest possible. And we say in our liturgy, for all. The next translation is going to say for many, which I disagree with. But for all, in the line of Julian of Norwich, who when she says, all will be well, all will be well, all will be well. And you know what she's looking at when she's saying all will be well? Her vision of hell, which is total isolation, total rupture of relationship, total freezing. And isn't it interesting that on the very first page of the novel, he says, the enormous room on the ground floor of this world state, whose motto is community, identity, and stability, he says, the enormous room on the ground floor faces towards the north, cold for all the summer beyond the pains. Winteriness responded to winteriness. The light was frozen, dead, a ghost. And this is the fertilizing room. He really is Dantesque in this. He takes Dante in the Divine Comedy. And he goes down to the bottom of hell where Satan is frozen. And the wings are just moving and stirring cold air around. The coldness of isolation, the absence of love, the absence of the only force which can bring us together in unity. That's how he starts the book. You get a chill. You get real scared. And you know what then's coming up. Everything is gray. Everything is black. Everything is white. So what are some of the other things we need? But the contradiction, the real contradiction. Because instead of community, identity, and stability, all you get is conformity, rigidity, and frigidity. Just the opposite. You get conformity, rigidity. Remember, there are two aspects of identity, you know. There's the stability, and then there's the roots, and then there's the wings. And you're frozen right there into the rigidity and the conformity and the frigidity. Interesting, isn't it? So the ideology of science constitutes the dominant culture. It affects the vision, it affects the destiny, it affects the values, it affects the norms of behavior, it affects the symbols. It alone defines bonds, boundaries, borders, and never presents them with any stress of border crossings until they go to the reservation. And then notice how they get into the reservation. They don't walk in, they don't drive in. A helicopter drops them in, and a helicopter pulls them out for this brief visitation into the paleontological age to see what things used to be like in those savage and bestial times. Okay? Good society, how is it governed? What kind of governance does it have? It has an oligarchy of intellectual, professional technocrats. That's all they are. Now, you realize, of course, that there is one theory even today when people want to straighten out this confused democracy in which we live, in which they believe that it has to be an administered society, not governed, but administered by technocrats, people who are the geniuses, like, Hawking's or whoever you can think of in the scientific world. Maybe Bill Gates, I don't know. Maybe some of these people who seem like the geniuses who are going to straighten everything out. Or as one president of a university told me some years ago when I was sitting next to him at a banquet, the computer. The computer. The computer is going to save the world. I said, pardon? No. Well, the poor man never saw the real fallout that is coming now with the computer. Artificial intelligence. And do you remember Simon, the Nobel Prize winner? He was at that university and he was working on, what do you call it? Artificial intelligence. I heard him give a talk there as well. And when you see the arrogance and the hubris, the theory was, if everybody is sharing all the information, we'll be on the same page. I said, well, how do you do that? He said, well, look, you go into Sierra Leone And you give all the people computers and you teach them how to use that, and they'll have all the access that they need to do, that they need to have for agrarian reform and raising crops, and they can feed themselves. And can you imagine the peace will come there? I said, his name was Syart, Dr. Syart. I said, Dr. Syart, I'm having a problem here. I said, because the one thing that we can identify in a very pragmatic way, the one thing theologically that we have tangible evidence of is sin. The mystery of God, you look up and you see the universe and so forth, but the most tangible thing is sin. And I said, I wonder where sin is going to appear in the computer. And believe me, I was totally ignorant of computers. I didn't know anything. Yes. You know what? I heard this Simon fellow who was a Nobel Prize winner. He was speaking to the students in all of the Catholic schools in Pittsburgh. And he came there and he gave his talk, and he was trying to put in very simple terms for the kids about what's going to happen in artificial intelligence. And one of the kids put his hand there. He said, now, are there any questions? And then one of the kids says, but what do we do with the human soul? Well, he had to skirt that one, you know. But this child gets up and asks the question, what do we do with the human soul? So there are no borders that you have to wrestle with in the world state. Did you know that? There's no wrestling going on with the borders. Everyone stays in the classification that DNA, they didn't even know about DNA then, but DNA has given to him or her. You know, you're the alpha, the beta, the gamma, the epsilon. Oh, the poor epsilons. They're very good at sweeping the floor and cleaning. And they have no desire to get out of that. In fact, talking about desire, there is no desire. There is no desire, except they've been trained very well in their experimentation with sex. And all the kids are in their little room playing with sex so that they get, they get used to that. But then you're going to get the soma coming out anyhow to help them even when they get to that point. Should there be the slightest possibility of a desire, give them soma. Just put them out. Everything is opposite of consciousness and conscience. Both are removed. When you are not conscious, your conscience can't work. That's why in the scriptures, the first invitation is always, wake up, wake up. That's the call of Advent, isn't it? Wake up. Okay. And then, of course, there is the Ford. Thank the Ford. Thank Ford. And what he did was, did you notice throughout the book, he uses Mustafa Mond. Mustafa Mond was a man living in England who was a great entrepreneur. He took all of the entrepreneurs and he then puts them over against the communists, Lenina and Trotsky and all of those kinds of things. So he's looking at both sides of the coin already, which our present Holy Father is doing with the magnoscope. With the microscope. He's not only looking at communism and radical socialism, but he's also looking at capitalism. And when he was in Brazil, he made some statements there that didn't please anybody, and it would behoove us. It would behoove us if we are not sectarian Catholics, namely, if we don't only accept going to Mass and saying our novena and our rosary, but if we want to get the whole bag on the horizon and look at everything, including social teaching and social justice, take what he writes and read it. This Pope is brilliant. He is probably one of the most brilliant people in all of Western civilization today. When you read his reflections on the fathers of the church, which he is doing, and he has a very clear idea of what he wants to accomplish in his pontificate. Very clear. When he goes back to those, and he is referring to the traditions, what he is trying to do is remember. And he says, look at our identity. Go back and remember over here. And remember Eusebius of Caesarea. Remember Cyril of Jerusalem. Remember all of these things. But he also points out in his Deus Caritas Est that there is a difference between charity and justice. The church's primary role is not to bring justice to the world. It is to bring mercy, which will always be needed and responds to the needs of people's immediate needs in the situation in which they find themselves. But justice is the responsibility of governments. And who is supposed to transform governments? The laity. It's your wonderful vocation to be the transformers of the world. I'm only supposed to be here helping you develop your vocation. And you know, if I'm not doing it, give me a good kick in the pants and say, wake up. Who do you think you are? Prancing around like a little pope? It's not your responsibility. Help the people grow, understand their identity, and carry on with their responsibility. So we have Ford, and notice what Ford does. He takes the cross, and he takes the top off the cross, and he puts a T on everybody. Now, some people may think that that is a Tau, the Greek letter, okay? And he's going to put this on everything. All it signifies is the assembly line of standard reproduction. And what he has done in taking the top off of the cross is taken the vertical dimension out of life. Everything is horizontal. He has just made standardization the essence of life, and has managed to produce assembly line individuals. And this production, notice, there is no fertility, there is no fruitfulness in the relationships, and everything is reduced to productivity and production. There's a great difference between the two. Fruitfulness, fertility, and production. He has marked each individual with the T. The vertical dimension is removed. Life is on the assembly line, and it is decanted and standardized into models. Happiness comes from the category in which you have been placed. He returns, the world state now returns back to the description of the ancient Greeks, where you're going to find your happiness. It means just do what you're structured to do. Follow a role. You know, when you read Greek mythology, that's all the Achilles and Agamemnon and all those kinds of people are only fulfilling their destiny, their role, their fate. And if they do that, at the end, it all works out and they get happy. But there doesn't have to be any happiness right there. So what is life? Life is a chemical, biological formula maintained in a chemical environment that will assure quality control, happiness of remaining within your caste. There's no desire to be other than you have been programmed to be genetically. All are deprived of potential for development. Notice, there's no potential for development. None whatsoever. You are your facticity. And there's no possibility of self-transcendence. Why would you tell that? I mean, you're blocked out. The esteemed cultural character types are the pneumatic personalities. He has gone back to even something which exaggerates the Platonic understanding of perfection. The Platonic idea is that you move out of the cave and you move out of away from everything that is human, and you get up to a place where you are totally head. The theoria, the contemplation. Somebody was talking about Martha and Mary over here. They forgot Martha. There's no Martha here. There's no both feet on the ground. There is just this pneumatic person. And did you heard the descriptions in there. Oh, she is so pneumatic. And it's opposed to what we were talking about when we talk about the transformation of the gifts by the Holy Spirit, the epiclesis, where you have, Father Ben talks about the aspirations and the inspirations. There's no inspirational dimension here in these people. There's no desire to be other than you have been programmed to be genetically. All are deprived of potential development or psychological growth. They're completely spiritualized. They are completely removed from the human. There's an absence of conscience. There's an absence of responsibility, and they don't even have any weakness. And if they don't have any weakness, there is no sin. In fact, at the end of the book, Savage says, let me see if I can find it here. I found it this morning. Yeah, it was really good. I liked it so much. Here it is. I think it's here. No, where did I find it? He's saying, I want to be able to grow old. He's saying, I want to be able to go through the stages of life. He says, I want to feel sad. I want to be able to feel happy. I want to be in touch with other people. I want to be able to suffer. All of these things make me human. But what they've done is extracted that all from these human beings. Everything, as Elizabeth says, is virtual. Did you know that there's a place now? I don't know whether they do these in these spas around here or not yet. I don't know whether they're advanced. But you can go into a spa and get on a walking machine, right? And it's programmed. Well, we're already programmed up and down. You're going up hills, going down hills, around turns, and so forth and so on. But you put this thing on your head. And what it does is it gives you a horizon. And you're walking along and you see mountains and you see trees, and they have the sounds of birds, and they have even smells. You get a wind coming at you. Everything is virtual. There is no touch. These kids, I guess the kids aren't this virtual stuff, aren't they?
The early technology for that came from, guess where? Disney World.
I said, well, that's it. I mean, and the other stuff that they're beginning to produce now anyhow is so unbelievable. And they go into the theater, and they sit in that seat, and it's giving them feelings, senses, emotion, and environment. So, what do we do with this touchy thing? I mean, the first word in the motto is community, right? Well, we are going to have community. We're going to have solidarity groups, and we're going to have community sings. And did you listen to the songs that they sing? Orky Porky or something like that, and they keep repeating Orgy Porgy. Yes, that's Orgy Porky. I can't get it right. Orgy Porky. Over and over and over, it is repeated until they see themselves being united in the orgy. It's the only way that it happens. No passion, no love. Isn't it interesting that the Shakespearean plays that he refers to are Romeo and Juliet and Othello? I mean, there you get passion. And when you read those lines from Shakespeare describing this relationship with Romeo and Julieta, And then you're just swept up into this passion of this love. And then you go over to the other side and you're talking about Otello, which is love gone mad. And jealousy, just the opposite side of love, and the passion. All of these have been forgotten. There's no such thing as love or passion. There's the only passing encounter sexually, and then what you need to do that is you have to have soma. Soma, the drug state, removing from all conflict. Soma, in Greek, meaning body. It's going to take you away from the body. It's going to get you out everything that could possibly be related to anything that has to do with relationships. It will take you away from the conflict of the borders. You won't have any borders. And then he uses these plays on the names. Lenina, Mustafa, Mond. How about Popé? How about Popé in the reservation? I'll let you go back and figure out what that means. Popé, P-O-P-E. Popé. Pardon me? It's the Pope. Why did he put that in there? Why did he do that? I'm not going to answer that question for you. I have to leave something for you to go back into and review for yourselves. So they visit the reservation with John Savage. I always wondered why he picked the name John. And then I thought, well, was he thinking of John's Gospel? John's Gospel, which is leading to everything that could possibly be human, the fullness of human life. And yet he makes him a savage and considered to be a savage. And it's the first time they have to cross borders and wrestle with another worldview. To be helicoptered into the reservation and out is the only way that they can come in contact. Mother, father, Paleolithic leftovers, if you want to call it that. Something at the bestial level, something which is savage, bringing life into the world by sexual encounter, where there might have been passion, and everything that's involved, and all of that. Sex resulting in conception and birth is considered filthy. And they find human life that had been removed from human memory. Notice, the memory is a faculty that forgets. So we have to remember, we have to celebrate, and that will lead us to belief. It is in our practices, communal practices. He did get that right. In the solidarity groups where they're singing Orgy Porgy, it's a practice over and over and over again. Practices form us. We need practices. We used to have these practices all the time in the Catholic Church. Some have been taken away. In some cases, they're coming back with a vengeance. In some cases, they're distorted and leading us once again away from the essential of the sacrament, the sacramental life. And the secondary things, speaking to human emotional need. Because in our prayer life, we must have liturgical practices. We must have popular devotions which capture the feeling of groups of people who are living a common life. We have to have personal prayer and practices. All three are necessary because what they do is keep the person in balance with the community. And it's the Eucharist, which is the principal practice of the Christian community. It is the work of the people. Laitos ergon. Laitos ergon in Greek means the work of the people. And that's where we get the word liturgy. How much do you think that that's your good work? How much do you see it as a practice which helps you to remember? How much do you see yourself entering into it with an attitude that looks and longs for and expects transformation? Each time you go there, something is meant to happen within you, within your heart, within your vision, and the way you look at the world. You should never be able to go to a liturgy not expecting some transformative action to take place in your life. Some moment, some word, whether it's in the word and the sacrament. And both are necessary. And they are held in balance. That's why since the Second Vatican Council, it's the pulpit and the altar which go together in the structure of the sanctuary. It is the movement from the liturgy of the Word to the liturgy of the sacrament. Savage wants to find his father. Big search for identity. He knows his mother. He knows he hasn't been decanted in some jar. He's not looking to go back into the jar where everything was conditioned and controlled. But he's looking for his father. He's the only one who has feelings in the book. And he's appalled by what he sees in civilization. Now, to do this book right would take a semester. I mean, this is a class. You know what happens to me? I get so frustrated because I want to teach so many classes. I want to take the book and just break it open with students and go through it. And did you see what's on this page? Did you see what's saying over here? John is a half-breed. Notice, he's a half-breed. All of my pages are marked. He's a half-breed, and he's not part of either society completely, which puts his feet in both worlds. And the best part of this is that all learning is by hypnopedic. It's hypnopedia. You're going to get it while you're sleeping. People are going to place all of these things, these subliminal messages into the unconscious. And that's what's meant to be driving you. So we had Romeo and Juliet. And on page 240, in my book anyhow, this is that passage I was talking about. He's talking to the controller who's coming in to control the quality of the situation. He has just come out of this thing, a violent, passionate surrogate, regularly for once a month. We flood the whole system with adrenaline. It's the complete psychological equivalent of fear and rage. Okay, so they're giving him a shot of adrenaline, everyone, adrenaline, okay? All the tonic effects of murdering Desdemona and being murdered by Othello without any inconveniences, you can have all that. You're just going to get your shot of adrenaline. But I like the inconveniences, John the Savage says. We don't, said the controller. We prefer to do things comfortably. But I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. In fact, said Mustafa Mond, you're claiming the right to be unhappy. Wow. All right then, said the Savage defiantly, I'm claiming the right to be unhappy. Not to mention the right to grow old and ugly and impotent. In other words, he does not need Viagra. The right to have syphilis and cancer, the right to have too little to eat, the right to be lousy, the right to live in constant apprehension of what might happen tomorrow, the right to catch typhoid, the right to be tortured by unspeakable pains of every kind. There was a long silence. Mustafa Mond shrugged his shoulders. You're welcome, he said. We should be proud of our humanity as human beings and persons. We should be proud to declare our identity as creatures of God who are both graced and sinful. We should be proud when somebody says, "Who are you?" to say that I am a free person, affected by my facticity, but with the wonderful capacity to transcend myself and not get locked into bad faith. The ability to take responsibility and have conscience when I have to decide with others in dialogue and everything that implies about bonding, about boundaries, about borders, and about border crossings, to go through the tensions of life, and in the tensions of life find God and my destiny. This is where we are. And this is what he says the world state has robbed us of. And then you move into John, the mystic and the contemplative, and he opens up the horizon even more. And then after taking John with the wings of the eagle, you come back to St. Paul, who is going around on his missionary journeys throughout the whole known world at the time, in and through the Mediterranean. And having been struck by this revelation, you know that his experience, when he describes his experience along the road to Damascus, that is not primarily a conversion. It is primarily a revelation. It is the veil being taken away. And when the veil is taken away, you are changed. And that is what we call conversion. Conversion is not an effort on our part. Conversion is being touched by the love of God, which changes us, and is the only ultimate power that can change anything in human life. Force does not permanently change. Discipline, regulation, imposition, ideology, none of it ultimately changes anybody. The only thing that can change us is loving respect. Maureen tied that all together at the very last framework, a frame on her presentation yesterday. So here is Paul talking to the Corinthians. You have to put this in a context so you understand. He is talking to the community at Corinth. This is his second letter to them. Corinth is on an isthmus. It's a very narrow strip of land, and everybody came from Rome going to Jerusalem over the isthmus because it cut off hundreds of miles by boat. And it was the sort of collection basket of the known world at the time. Everybody went to Corinth, and every so many years they would collect all of these people, these sophists. Sophists are people who hold that everything is relative, and therefore they can speak out whatever they want to speak. They had these crazy poets. They had people proposing different kinds of myths. They had different philosophers. They had artists. They had everybody coming through there. And all of the people taking care of these ships and so forth, all in this collection basket called Corinth. So he wrote the first letter to them after he had been there, founding this community. And this community was, getting rambunctious. They were in competition with one another and saying, who is the best and who is not the best, and my gift is better than yours, and I follow Paul, and you follow Peter, and I follow Apollos, and so forth and so on. What was meant to be a unity in love became a catastrophe in competition. So he wrote his first letter in which he emphasized the nature of the body of Christ. All one Spirit, different gifts for the building up of the body. So that went along for a while, and then he left them, and as you know, when the leader leaves, the mice play. The cat's away, the mice play. And they started getting into other kinds of things, and then there were more serious things like incest going on and all these kind of things, eating the food of them that was offered in sacrifice by the Romans, and so forth. And he's getting wind of this, so he writes another letter. He can't go to them, and he writes another letter. That letter is lost, but he refers to it in what is called the second letter to the Corinthians. And in there, he's trying to say, hey, don't ask me for credentials. You know, you are over there and you're saying, who is he to come in here and tell us? What kind of credentials does he have? You know, we're over here, we can handle this for ourselves. So he gets over with them. And at the beginning of this letter, he makes a play between consolation and desolation. And when you read the first chapter, he uses consolation 9 times in one little paragraph. 9 times. And what he is saying is, we are not like other people who expect to find consolation in itself. We find consolation right in the midst of our desolation. And your consolation is what holds me up in my desolation. And my consolation holds you up in your desolation, because we're all in this together. It's impossible for Paul to think of salvation being an individualistic thing. The salvation consists in coming together in love in a community. That's what it's all about. So he goes on here and he comes up to the third chapter, and it begins to unfold. And as I unfold this, as I give you some of my own insights on this, I want you to take everything that you've heard this week and try to apply that terminology to what we're going to read here. All right? He says, as it is, to this day, whenever Moses is read, the hearts of the children of Israel are covered with a veil. It means they're blinded to the horizon. Is there a limit in that horizon that's going on there? It's the boundary which has become rigid. They can't think outside the box. They haven't got the point yet that love expands the boundary and the horizon and gives you a new identity. He's saying the veil is there. The cultural world has veiled them. The cultural world has hidden. They haven't gotten the revelation that I got on the road to Damascus yet. It hasn't clicked. And because of that, these poor people are locked into themselves. They can't get out. Therefore, they are locked into all of the facticity of their lives, which they say, he took us out of Egypt. He took us through the desert. He brought us into the promised land, and we're locked right in it now, and we're not going to get out. And this veil will not be taken away till they turn to the Lord. Now, Paul is not saying that in a condemnatory way. He's saying that with great sadness in his heart. Because as he says in the epistle to the Romans, these are still people of the covenant. But what they have done is they still keep it limited to one people. They don't see everybody as becoming children of the covenant. And therefore, their concept even of community and a people is very limited. The boundaries are put there, and They will remain enclosed. The transcendence is not coming with them. Then he makes a big shift. Now this Lord, until they stand, they turn to the Lord. Well, who is this Lord? This Lord is the Spirit. Now, isn't that interesting that he is applying the name Lord to the Spirit? Lord, he says, is the name given to Jesus, and every knee is going to bow to Jesus, who emptied himself and became a slave. And for that he has raised up everybody else through his ministry. This Lord is the Spirit, and where the Lord is, there is freedom. So the extent to which you experience true freedom, to know that freedom is rooted, and freedom allows new life and adaptation and transformation, that is when you are experiencing the dominant force in your life, the Lord, the giver of life, who is going to enable your continued progress in growing in your identity as community. He says the community is veiled. But when you come to the Lord, one Spirit, one Lord, one baptism, this is going to give you the freedom in your interaction with each other. All of us, that's a community. All of us, with our unveiled faces, like mirrors reflecting the glory of God. Maureen talks about mirroring in the relationship in which we come to a sense of our identity. When I look at Bill Moore and I see the glory of God reflecting in his face, when I look at any of you and I see a radiance coming out of this presence of the Spirit in you, and it's mirrored back to me, and I have to recall who I am as a temple of the Spirit of God, with God dwelling in me, the immanent God, who is also transcendent. And because of the immanence, I can bow down in adoration and say, God is all, and I'm nothing. Not in the sense that Americans would be afraid of that last phrase, because Americans don't even have an understanding of their dignity anyhow. And for an American to say, I'm nothing, means that they're in a really black hole. They're never going to get out. But the true worshiper will always say, God is all. I'm nothing. I'm nothing. And God chooses to dwell in this nothing. All of us. All of us. Your face is unveiled. My face is unveiled. Like mirrors, reflecting the glory of God, are being transformed. There's the ongoing progressive nature of this that Father Ben talked about when he quoted John. And the Holy Spirit will reveal everything to you. You see, because the Holy Spirit not only transforms, the Holy Spirit, as Jesus says, is going to come to you and He's going to remind you of everything that I taught. Bring to your mind. Never let you forget. Enliven your memory. Take your Alzheimer's, your spiritual Alzheimer's away so that you know exactly who you are, and nobody can just steal that from you. Nobody. Transformed into the image that we reflect in brighter and brighter glory. This is the working of the Lord, who is the Spirit. I want you to just sit with that for a second. I want you to get in touch with the feeling of this text and what feeling it brings up in you. allowing you to recognize the dignity of your person being created in the image of God. To get that right, to enter into the revelation, you can hold your bonds, your boundaries, your borders, and border crossings in perfect balance. Because that removes all fear that would be attached to any possibility of your having it stolen from you. To enter into that is to enter into the mystery. The first component of a Catholic identity. Once you are rooted in that, and you hold on to the experience, you can move into the second half of the text. Such, by God's mercy, is our ministry. Both mystery and ministry are tied together. They become both Mary and Martha in one. The two are two sides of one coin, which has great value. And when you go and sweep the house and you find the coin in the hidden place of the room, you know that you have what will hold all of your life together. And such by God's mercy. Mercy is not deserved. You may be compassionate and enter into compassion with somebody else in their suffering. Mercy is a complete giving of love to them without them meriting anything. That's God's mercy. It's His love. It's another word for love. And we are to serve that, the ministerium, the ministry. And therefore we do not waver. And then I love this line. But we have renounced all shameful secrecy. We are not going to keep this a secret any longer. This is the good news. And we will put it before the world. And watch how He's going to put it before the world. Be very careful about how you interpret how it's going to go before the world. It's not our way to be devious or to falsify the Word of God. Instead, in God's sight, we commend ourselves to every human being with a conscience by showing the truth openly. How are you showing the truth openly? You are the sacrament. The sacrament is a sign, an effective sign. It has an effect. The witness value of your life is the sacrament. The witness value of our life is the sacrament. And we're not going to keep it secret because, as the Second Vatican Council says at the beginning of the dogmatic constitution on the Church, Lumen Gentium Christus est. Christ is the light of the world. As the primordial sacrament. And the Church, which is His body, is the sacrament. Instead, in God's sight, we commend ourselves to every human being with a conscience by showing truth openly. Notice, he's talking about people with a conscience. People who are conscious and understand that they have an obligation, that they have responsibility, they have accountability. If our gospel seems to be veiled to all, it is so to those who are on their way to destruction. And that's just a statement of fact. Because when the gospel is not there before your face and your face is still veiled, you are disintegrating. You are deprived of what will give you life. That is why the Church has the responsibility, obligation to preach the good news to every person on the face of the earth. It doesn't mean all are going to accept it. It doesn't mean all are going to have unveiled faces to receive it. It means that many will reject it. It means that many people will become very angry with it. They will be challenged just as much as the scribes and the Pharisees. But nonetheless, we have the obligation, as Jesus had the obligation, to live it and therefore to preach it. The good news. Because 5 minutes. You're going to, you go. She's so strict. All right. Let me go on. I'll try to make this a little bit quicker. If our gospel seems to be veiled at all, it is to those who are on the way to destruction. And we are supposed to be caring about that. The unbelievers whose minds have been blinded by the God of this world. That narrow horizon, which doesn't give any hope. If there's one theological virtue that we need today, it is hope. And whenever everybody's linked into all of their comforts, their creature comforts, and all these kids have everything that their parents give them and everything else, and they have no hope. They're so lonely. I have to go on. By the God of this world, so that they cannot see shining the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. We are created in the image. He is the image. It is not ourselves that we are proclaiming. Wow. That makes me tremble. Every time I open my mouth about the gospel, I get very nervous. You are not supposed to be looking at me. You are supposed to be looking at Christ. And if I fail to do that, I have become as bad as Judas. It is not ourselves that we are proclaiming, but Christ Jesus as the Lord, and ourselves as your servants, for Jesus' sake. It is the same God who in creation said, "Let light shine out in darkness," that has shone into our hearts to enlighten them with the knowledge of God's glory, the glory on the face of Christ, which is our horizon. And then the most consoling line in all of the New Testament for me, besides one other in John. We hold this treasure in pots of earthenware, so that the immensity of the power of God is not our own. We're subjected to every kind of hardship, but never distressed. We see no way out.
but we never despair. We are pursued, but never cut off. We are knocked down, but still have some life in us. Always. And this is the point. To live the love of the horizon of Christ, this is the only way to do it, and the only way to be a sacrament. Always we carry with us in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus too may be visible in our body. Us. And that's where I have to.